Sometimes just starting a cue can feel almost insurmountable. Well, today we're going to talk about templates, as well as look at a cue featuring Omnisphere patches chosen only at random on my week 31 vlog check-in. What is happening, YouTube? This is Dave Croft. Welcome to my week 31 of my 52 cues vlog check-in, where I am unpacking a cue that I wrote from the week before, and I am committing to writing at least one cue for the entire year, talking about the cue, unpacking it, talking about the sounds, as well as talking about things going on in the industry, in my life, or just questions that have come up. If this is your first time, thank you so much for joining us. If this is if you're a return visitor, welcome back. If you haven't already, please consider doing the whole like and subscribe thing. That really does help composers just like you find the video. And before I get too deep into it, I want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons whose contributions help keep this channel afloat. More on Patreon and patrons at the end of the video. And also one other thing, I am doing another Feedback Friday on August 27th at 4 p.m. Eastern. So you can join us over at 52 Cues and submit a cue if you want real live feedback on any cue that you have written. So all of that information is also in the description below. If you want to skip over the vlog portion of the video and get right on to the cue breakdown, you can check out the time codes downstairs. So we're going to be talking about templates today. This is a question that's actually come up a couple of times. Templates, in case you're kind of new to it, the idea of using a template typically in production music, or even just in music for media, is having a session, a Logic session or a Pro Tools session or Cubase or whatever, set up so that you can sit down and start writing. Now, for most media composers, especially film composers with super powerful computers, what this means is that they have a template, a session set up that has all of their sounds preloaded, or at least pre-configured into their DAW. So all of the parts of the orchestra, the first violins, second violins, cello, viola, all the way down, all the brass, the woodwinds, into the percussion, it's already there. And so when they go to sit down to write, they just dial up the oboe sound and start composing the oboe parts. And for film composers, that's a really good idea because they're using the same palette, the same sound palette for the most part for every single project. And if even if they're not using the same sounds from project to project, if they're scoring a 2-hour feature, then they're going to be using those same sounds for the whole movie, for 30, 60, 90 minutes worth of music, depending on how intense it is. And so with the idea that they're going to be hiring an orchestra and actually recording an orchestra, then it makes sense for them to have a DAW session set up to where every time they make a new cue, that they're not having to reload all of the sounds, either directly into their Logic or Cubase session or Pro Tools, or using a tool like VE Pro, which uses a secondary computer to host the samples and then kind of network connect it to their host computer so that the host computer isn't doing the sample processing. And so you can have kind of a primary computer and a secondary computer, and it kind of shares the load across multiple computers. Now, and I tried that at some point. I tried having a template set up with my most often used sounds. And I actually found it not very helpful for me in the production music world. And here's why. because with library music and composers who are working in production music, you are changing your styles, you're changing genres, sometimes from week to week. And so you are always dialing up new sounds. If you're writing a tension cue and you're going into, Omnisphere or Alchemy or Serum or whatever, then you're not necessarily always using the same patches over and over, the way that a film composer would use the same violins over and over. And so I actually got away from using a sound template because I found myself going back in and adding new sounds anyway. And it really didn't help me. Now, I'd love to hear from you, especially if you're a production music composer. Let me know what you do for a template. All that having been said, I do use a template. And I use a template primarily to help speed up the onboarding process and getting me going and saving times in effects routing. And I use a template to help out with my screen sets. Basically, all the little details that I find interrupt my creative process, like adding a reverb or making sure that this tool is where I need it to be with my key commands or whatever, or making sure that my screens are set up to where if I'm ready to really dig into some MIDI editing, that my piano roll is on my biggest screen. But if I'm ready to mix, then I make sure that my mixer's on my biggest screen. That's how I use templates. And I want to show you my template, and I'm happy to share it. I'll put a link to it in the description below. It's a Logic template, and it primarily features effects routing and some other screen sets things. So let's take a quick look at my template. And again, if you use Logic, then you can download it in the description below. Here is my template. I know, impressive, isn't it? There really isn't much to it. Now, as far as the sounds loaded, the only sound I have loaded is a piano, is a contact piano that is just a basic grandeur piano, and I just have that there in case I need to jump in and just start jotting something down. Just super simple. But really, what I use the template for is this effects routing, and I have all of my reverbs preloaded. Now, I use east-west spaces for the vast majority of my reverbs, primarily because I like their Reynolds Hall preset, which has all of the different impulses taken from around an orchestral stage, so that if I'm loading up something that's percussion, then I can feed it into the percussion reverb. If low brass, high brass, or even something that kind of occupies that space in the arrangement, even if it's electronic or hip hop or whatever. And I have found that this works really well for me because they're subtly different reverbs with subtly different panning, because they're stereo and all of that, but because they're all recorded in the same space, they all blend really, really well together. And so that works for the vast majority of my reverbs. If I'm like, hey, I just need some reverb, then I will use this. I do have this other reverb, this R4 reverb from Exponential Audio, which is now owned by Isotope, just as a kind of an artificial reverb. If I need more reverb that sounds less like it's actually like in a space, then I will use that. The other thing I have automatically routed is my parallel compression bus, which is just a really, really simple one knob pressure. I'm a huge fan of the one knob series because this is my kind of plug-in. Just turn one knob and go. And this works for the vast majority of my parallel compression needs. And I have a routed effects bus that doesn't have anything on it. It's just there in case I need it. So those are the effects that I have preloaded. But I also have different screen sets, which I could change, but you wouldn't see them because you're only seeing the one screen. But my composing screen has the DAW here, or the arrangement window, and then over on my right side is my piano roll, and then up top is my mixer window. And so when I go to my second preset, which is mixing, then that flips. So now my mixer window's over here and my piano roll is up here. And then I have another screen set which puts it all on one screen. And then finally I have a scoring preset which brings across, I don't have any notation or anything happening right now, so you really can't see that, but it has a notation view if I ever need to go into that. And so that is essentially my template. But it's not really all there is to it. Because one of the key takeaways from using a template is speed up onboarding of sounds, so that when you say, hey, I need this sound, then you can just quickly get access to it. But we're not really without options. And that brings me to using my library and really filling out my user patches, specifically in Logic. I'm imagining Cubase, Ableton, they all have ways to save user patches. And as I keep creating new tracks and I think, hey, this is a sound that I want to use frequently, then I will save it as a user patch. And because I use the same template for all of my cues, namely all the reverb routing, then I can pre-map those reverb settings or parallel compression or whatever into my patches. And so if I'm creating a new track and I go into my library, this actually started in Omnisphere because let's say no plugin, go into my library, open up a user patch, and let's say my drums, and I want some damaged drums. So you can see it loads up a handful of reverbs as well as my parallel compression. And if I want damage 2, you can see it loads up sounds with my reverb routing. Some of my hi-hat, or my hip-hop. I can even preload some coloring as needed. I have 808 sounds that I use. I have an orchestral sub, which I made. Another bass that I used. My Cinebrass horns. Those sound really, really great. I really like those. Here's all of my BBCSO, my Symphobia. And so I use the template to have all of my routing already ready to go. And then use my library to really jumpstart the loading of sounds so it doesn't take too long. Because my cues change from project to project enough to where it doesn't make sense for me to have a template with a bunch of sounds like loaded in. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for me. Again, I'd love to hear, if you're a production music composer, what's worked for you. But having a template that has a lot of my effects already pre-routed and screen sets with my tools and my secondary tools and what I'm ready to look at and ready to use and all of those shortcuts already baked in. And with Logic, when you save screen sets, it saves all of these options. It saves, like I said, the tools. It saves what you have turned on. It saves what track header components I have already turned on. That's where the template really, really helps me. And then I use my library to speed up loading sounds. Now, in addition to MIDI instruments, I can also load in, save user patches. So if I have a stereo double, if I have a ukulele double, and if I have like electric guitar and all of that, I can save those as well into my library. So it's not just user sounds, it's presets. And that, for me, has been really, really good and saved me a ton of time and really helped to jumpstart the creation process. So like I said, what about you? What has been your template journey? I would love to hear from you. Again, I'm gonna save this and put it down there for you if you want access to that. It's got all of the settings that I use, including sample rate and bit resolution and all of that. So if you like that, then you can definitely go for that. It's not a trade secret or anything. Okay, so with all that, now let's take a look at my cue. It's called I've Roulette of Suspicion, and it is the cue that I wrote during last week's patron-only live stream, and it features Omnisphere patches chosen entirely at random. So here is Roulette of Suspicion, and we'll talk about it on the other side. Roulette of Suspicion, and really interesting, fun cue. This was written during last week's patron live stream, and the idea is I wanted to challenge myself and write a cue using only Omnisphere patches chosen completely at random. If you've not used Omnisphere before, it is a synth, and it has a randomized feature because it's a pretty intense library of sounds. It has an intense library of sounds. And if you were to load up everything, you know what? I should probably let's create a new Omnisphere instance here, because I don't want to accidentally hit the wrong thing. And so what I did was I loaded up all of the sounds And it has a little randomize button here. And I literally clicked it 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then whatever sound came up, that was the sound that I used. Now, this one obviously wasn't part of that, but that was what I did for every single one of my Omnisphere patches. Now, full disclosure, I did record 2 or 3 rather suspended cymbal. Actually, it's a 22-inch China cymbal that I recorded just for some extra ambiance. But every other sound was chosen completely at random. Now, I really lucked out because the first sound that I got was this plucky piano sound. And it's called My Name is Joe. It's an unfinished patch. And just kind of going down the list here. Had this noise arpeggiator. Another unfinished patch. Had some synth womps, kind of some brassy sounds. And this is just stock. Had a pad that I called Rusty Pad. Just kind of has some creakiness to it and rusty swings. This is stock Omnisphere. Had this air pad. Another unfinished patch. Had a low pluck, which is the same pluck here, just on the low side of things. Got this detuned pluck, which is a stock Omnisphere. Had to be really careful with this one because it was really detuned, and if I overplayed it, then the pitch would really push out. I made a reverse of that as well as a reverse of the pluck. So I rendered it to audio, rendered a single note, rendered it to audio, reversed it, and threw tons of delay on it. And I have a reverse pluck. So it's this sound just reversed. Another unfinished patch. Nice and moody. Got this synth pulse. Kind of a sidechained type sound. Stock Omnisphere. Synth bass sound, which is stock Omnisphere. It's really interesting. As I was building it, I would say, hey, I need this type of a sound. So I would kind of roll the dice. I'd open up Omnisphere, do my hit randomize 5 times, and whatever I got, I went with. And I was kind of like, come on, Daddy needs a kick drum. And so I would roll the dice, and sometimes I would get something I would use. Sometimes I wouldn't, or something I was looking for. But I always used it. Whatever I didn't throw away any sounds. Whatever sound came up, I found a way to use. And this synth bass came up, and it became kind of a primary feature of the cue, and kind of pushed the cue into this kind of other territory. I feel like the mod wheel's being weird. And so a sub kick. which had this boom, boom. So I had to make it really, really short, threw on some delay so it sounds more like rolling toms. And then the last Omnisphere patch that I found was probably the hardest to use, and it's this flies attacking the monkeys. And this is the only sound where I actually turned off one of the oscillators because it actually has these monkey sounds. It's pretty far down the octave. Ooh, that's really, really, really rough. So I pitched it way, way down, turned off one of the oscillators, and it's this kind of brooding sound. All right, so like I said, I did record a few cymbal things. One is just cymbal scrapes, but they're bowed cymbal, and it's a 22-inch Wuhan that I picked up on Amazon for like $100. Actually, no, I'm sorry, it's not a Wuhan. It is a Stag. More than likely made in the exact same factory. But those turned out really, really well. And then I did a couple of suspended cymbal rolls on that Wuhan, which makes it sound almost gong-like. It sounds like a really thin, small gong. Layer that on top of the bowed cymbal. And then I got a brush and then just did some light taps. As far as form, very, very predictable, basic form. Start off with your melody. Add layers, then add density into the layers, so adding octaves. So like I said, I got really lucky with a couple of these sounds. This melody, this piano melody, that really drove the type of cue that it ended up being. The synth pulse helped, because that's the type of sound you really want for this type of light, intrigue, tension type of a cue. It's when the synth bass came in that it kind of took a synth wavy turn. Not really synth wave, but it kind of pushed it into that territory. So there are a couple of things I kind of learned and discovered throughout this process of using random sounds. The first is that by creatively limiting myself, it really forced me to find creative solutions using what I had, because I was committing to whatever I dialed up, I was going to use. And when that little flies and monkeys patch came out, I was like, oh man, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble with this. But I was committed to using it. And so finding a new way to look at the tool and work it to where it was going to serve a purpose in the cue. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that I feel like I really never took the time to really learn the sounds that I already have. And I think that's just how we are, isn't it? You know, we talk about, guitarists collecting pedals or drummers collecting cymbals and snare drums, but man, we're just as bad collecting plugins and the new next shiny, dialing up, a sound and be like, I'm not really feeling what I like. So instead of digging further into your library, you maybe check out the Spitfire website and see what's new, and they're always running sales. Or you find patch libraries, or you download, hey, this new library came out, this Zebra or Complete Ultimate Collector's Edition, and it has this new thing. And so those are all great and wonderful. And Lord knows I've definitely invested into plenty of plugins and virtual instruments. But maybe, and I'm telling myself this, maybe I should learn the tools I have better because they're capable of a lot more. And like going into that flies and monkeys patch and really, okay, how can I work this? And it forced me to use the synth, learn new things about what Omnisphere already did, but maybe I just didn't know or I had long since forgotten. So instead of reaching for my wallet for a new sound, maybe I should dig further into the library that I already have. So that was Roulette of Suspicion, my week 31 cue. I do hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for sticking around. Like I said, I could not do this without the help and support of my Patreon patrons who give their real, actual money to help keep this channel afloat. One of the benefits of my Patreon patrons is they get access to the patron-only music production live stream, which this was a part of. We have chats, they ask questions, and it's a real back and forth. And usually it's Thursday afternoons at 4 o'clock Eastern, and sometimes it will lead into the following day. So if you're interested in all that, that information is below. And like I said at the beginning, we are having our next Feedback Friday. So if you have a cue you would like professional feedback on, go over to 52cues.com. That's going to point you to the Facebook group and find the post where we are accepting submissions. That is Friday, August 27th at 4 p.m. Eastern. And lastly, if you haven't, please consider liking and subscribing the video to the video and to the channel. It really does help composers just like you find the channel. So thank you guys so much. I hope you have a fabulous week 32, and I will see you next time. Until then, peace.